All right. So hopefully if you're just joining on YouTube side here this morning, we started off here this morning with a piece net from Greg Hunter, sitting down with Catherine Austin Fitz here this morning. If you missed it, you can check it out on the various platforms here this morning. And roll it back over on Rumble, over on the Foxhole side, over on any of the other places and that you find the channel and that here in your link descriptions and that below. And that being said, let's get off to things here this morning. Bear with me one moment here because we got off to such an early start. Well, the reports net out of the markets net here this morning, and that we're not quite ready yet. So that's how early we got off to the start here this morning. And let's see here, and there we go. I think we're good there. All right, so that being said, let's see here this morning. Over to the latest and greatest in that we're going to get into here on the show here this morning. Start off with again, this piece of net we just started off with here this morning. Again, if you're just joining late here this morning, tune it in over on the YouTube side. Catherine Austin Fitz sitting down with Greg Hunter, escaping the digital concentration camp. Gold fights the financial control grid. Enlightening interview for about the last 58 minutes or so. Also talk about Europe generates the most electronic waste. We'll get into some interesting details there. Also talk about how Amazon package delays. AWS still suffering degraded service. This after yesterday's data center outage caused lots of problems net across the internet. Talked a little bit about it at the onset here yesterday, and here's extra details to that, apparently impacting the delivery side of things from Amazon as well. Also, Paramount is laying off up to 3,000 employees starting this month, so more layoffs occurring. Also getting into chipmaker Nexperia. China arm tells staff to ignore Dutch headquarters. And the deepening semiconductor issue in that playing out over there. We talked about here recently the Dutch government having taken control over said company in that there. And I don't know, by any other means, it would be probably considered an act of war. But we'll keep tabs on that. Also, OpenAI, Microsoft friction grows as ChatGPT app growth slows. We'll talk about that in regards to the data center build-outs. And, I don't know, if things are slowing down and nobody's using these ChatGPTs, why are they building so many data centers? Ask yourself that question. Why do we need so many? From there, India's largest metals refinery just ran out of silver for the first time in history. Silver, the big run up here, north of $50. A little bit of a pullback here today, I believe. We'll get into that here in just a bit. Also, world's most advanced AI chips now being made in America due to Trump's policies. That, according to Jensen Huang over at NVIDIA. We'll get into the details there, more on the chip side. And the crisis and revolution hidden in plain sight. Charles U. Smith with the piece out. We'll get into that as well. And what's most affected by federal cuts to DEI and EBT. We'll get into that as the shutdown and that continues to linger on here. What are we, 21 days, 22 days, something like that into this thing, and no signs of any sort of compromise on either side, and we know the reasons why. No need to belabor. But nonetheless, we'll get into that, all that, and more here this morning. So, without further ado, check see what the weather is doing here across the country here this morning, and get the old map snap brought up. There we go. Out to the left coast net we go here this morning. Not much doing. Not only across the left coast, but pretty much everything almost west of the Mississippi. Got a little bit of scatter net up in Minnesota here this morning, up around the Canadian border, and maybe a little bit down toward the southern and eastern portions of Arkansas, northeastern portions of Louisiana, and cutting across into Mississippi at net. Looks like about the only system net coming across there. Folks net down in Ohio maybe got a little bit coming around off that system net coming out of Canada, wrapping down around and into Ohio there. Folks net up in Maine got a little bit of weather and that to contend with up in those parts, and folks net down in Florida looking pretty good here on the day. Folks net over off the Pacific side, doesn't look like we got any spinners on the water down in those parts here. It looks like 99E I think was kind of in this general area net here last week, having fizzled out. Don't think we have any others net on the water here as of late. Matter of fact, I'm going to actually check up in Alaska because I did see it. There's a typhoon effects net that hit here within the last week, and apparently I don't typically scale up to look for hurricanes, typhoons, anything of that nature up there, but nonetheless, it appears nothing up in those waters either. Over on the Atlantic side, it looks like not much doing over on the Atlantic side either. It looks like maybe we might be winding down toward the end of the hurricane season here, and it's been a pretty quiet one. Every single one of the hurricanes that we've seen on the Atlantic side thus far this year almost acts like there's been a repellent on the East Coast as they've typically been out to sea. None made landfall in that here throughout the majority of the year. We do see 98L though, it looks like, maybe down in the Caribbean in that here. It looks like not too far off the coast of Venezuela, maybe down in those parts there, and we'll keep tabs on this guy here, see if that matures into a named storm here in the coming days and hours. So 98L, the only one we got there, and let's see, by way of precip in that here this morning. If you're out to the west, again, not much doing. A little fog in that on your drive if you're coming down the left coast net of Washington State, down in Oregon here this morning. Otherwise, looks like folks net across much of the west net pretty open and clear. Not until you come across the upper Midwest in Minnesota, into Wisconsin, maybe a little bit down into Iowa, see a little bit of scattering net down through there. But otherwise, the majority of the rain in that is up around the Canadian border, picking up less than a tenth or so of an inch of rain through there. Maybe northern parts of Michigan, maybe also see a little bit of rain, maybe a tenth or so. Folks net down into Ohio, cutting across into the western side of Pennsylvania. Looks like picking up a little bit less than a tenth. And the folks net down to the south. If you're down around, again, the southeastern portions of Arkansas, northeastern portions of Louisiana, cutting across into Mississippi. It looks like down through that area there, picking up maybe a tenth or so of an inch of rain through there. High pressure out in front of it, though, and it looks like everybody else net up and down the eastern seaboard looking pretty good. Until you get to New England, up around Maine, looks like maybe a little bit of rain net up through those parts here on the morning. And temperature-wise, looks like folks net down in Florida coming in right around the 80-degree mark or so down in the southern parts of Florida here this morning. To the north, about a little more than 10, 12-degree swing. It had been a little chillier than that earlier. About 69, 70 degrees net toward the panhandle areas of Florida here this morning. Folks net up through Georgia, through the Carolinas in the 60s, net through there. Virginia in the 60s. Looks like all the way up into Maryland, Delaware area in the 60s. And by the time you hit up to Pennsylvania, start to tail off in the upper 50s a bit. And the folks net up into New England in the 50s. And maybe, I don't know, is there some 40s net mixed in here? Mid-50s it looks like. And maybe some upper 40s net if you're up in the northern parts of Vermont and Hampshire into New York here this morning. Folks net back to the west in New York in the mid-50s. Pennsylvania in the 50s net pretty much across much of the state. West Virginia in the 50s net as well. And by the time you work your way back down toward the Gulf of America here this morning, back toward the upper 60s net if you're coming across from Florida into Alabama, back toward Mississippi in the 70s, and by the time you get over toward Louisiana in the mid-upper 70s, and by the time you get down around Houston, you're already in the low 80s, and southern tip of Texas coming in right around the 80-degree or so mark as well. Folks in that northern part of Texas, though, going to be in the upper 50s, so a good 20-degree swing net through there. Pushing up through the plains, 50s net, up across Oklahoma, Kansas, up in Nebraska, start to tail off in the 40s, and by the time you get up toward the northern portions of North Dakota, you're going to be in the 30s net up around the Canadian border here this morning. And for the folks net over in Minnesota, in the 40s net as well, across much of the state, Wisconsin in the 40s, maybe some upper 40s net by the time you get down toward Milwaukee along the lake. Folks net over to the west, so if you're over in Montana, it looks like into some 30s and upper 20s even. If you're up around the northern portions of Montana, up around the Canadian border here this morning, back to the west in the 40s. Folks net over in Idaho in the 30s net and some 20s net mixed in and through those areas there. Folks net down to Wyoming in the 20s and net over in the northwest portion of the state. Folks net back toward Washington State, though, looks like some 40s net more to the east. 30s net, 40s pretty much kind of in the mix there as well. 40s net back along the coast. Looks like that's pretty much the case net for the folks net over to Oregon. 30s net back toward the east side of the state and California. 30s net across top end of the state there. 40s net back toward the coastal areas. And by the time you get down toward the southern part of Cali here this morning, you're going to be in the mid-upper 60s net, depending on locations. Folks net down in the southern and western parts of Arizona, also in the 60s net to start your morning. So a little chilly start to your morning net out to the west. 20s and 30s starting to mix in. Seeing some SNOW here as of late, none here today. But nonetheless, it is getting to be that season, folks. And cloud cover. Looks like folks net out to the west, seeing some clouds creeping in out of the Pacific area and down through Canada. Otherwise, going to see some fairly open skies across much of Big Sky country and net over into Montana, to the west side of the Dakotas, and all the way down across the southwest, much of the south through there, big open skies. Should see some fairly sunny skies net here today. Upper Midwest and that, though, should be under some cloud cover, and there you kind of see that wraparound from these system net coming out of Canada and stretching all the way down toward the coastal areas of Texas, down in Louisiana, down in Mississippi, Alabama, cutting across through there and up through the Ohio River Valley. Out in front of that, though, should see some high pressure. Folks net down in Florida should see 10, 20, 30% cloud cover, sun peeking through, and folks net on up the eastern seaboard should see some sunshine here today. Unless, of course, you're in the northern parts of Vermont and New Hampshire, up into Maine here this morning, then, yeah, you're going to see some clouds net here for a good portion of the day. So here's a quick take a look at the weather and by way of power outages net here this morning. I think we're still stuck on yesterday. Let's back that up. Take see what's going on around the country here this morning. Let's get back here. What do we do? There we go. Around the country and that here this morning, it looks like about 53,000 or so folks without power. And it looks like, let's see, by way of the legacy map here this morning. There we go. Not much doing by way of any sort of weather-related issues net here this morning. Looks like maybe Texas got about 8,900, 8,700 folks without power in New Jersey, and Colorado got about 4,600. So not enough to trip the old stoplight charts here on the morning. And by way of smoke and fire maps and that here this morning, looks like hopefully we're getting toward the end of the season here. We can put this to rest here before long. Still got some fires net up in the Alberta area, and to the west of that, up in Canada, still got dozens of fires up through there, onesie twosies net through there as well. Still got about 20 or so fires net up in Washington State. Plenty of fires net across Washington and Oregon down through there. Looks like actually kind of picked up in the last day or so. Dozens of fires all throughout that area, some of those producing some hot spots. Seeing some dense smoke in some of the areas net out to the east of Portland. May see some poor air quality down through those areas. Folks in that northern part of Cali got a couple 13 fires net north of Sacramento. Some of those starting to kick up some decent amounts of smoke over in those areas. And down to the south of LA, between there and San Diego, it looks like got about a half dozen fires net down through that area as well. Over to the southeast, it looks like still got a couple, 2-3 dozen fires net down around the Florida-Georgia line. A dozen fires net up through Georgia, another 15 or so up into Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, back toward Louisiana, Arkansas, up through southern parts of Missouri. Still got dozens and dozens of fires net through those areas. Still see some of the smoke net getting kicked up, shoving off to the east, and maybe some dense smoke in some select areas. May see some poor air quality in those respective areas and that as well. So, that being said, over to the markets we go here this morning. Global stock rally pauses gold, silver slide from record high. And for the folks net over on YouTube side here this morning, thank you for tuning in. Make sure you get over to the